I'm going to take a moment to talk through 951. When we left off yesterday, we addressed that our equation for height, we could replace h of t with 40. That's our value for our fog layer. And then we addressed that because it was a quadratic, in order to use any of our strategies, I needed to get it set equal to 0, so we moved our 40 over. This is where we left off. I gave you about 5 minutes to work on it, and then I said, hey, finish it tonight. Now here's the deal. I'm going to talk through the rest of this, and I'm going to highlight a couple different ways you can go about solving it. But before I use any of those strategies, the first thing I want to do is I want to recall the fact that, hey, I would like smaller numbers. I also like it when I can make t squared positive because I think it makes the rest of the steps easier. So I'm going to do the following. I'm going to choose to divide everything by -4. Okay, I see that 4 goes into everything. In fact, I don't even have to just do 4. I'm going to do 8. 8 goes into everything. Okay, and that means that this side over here is also 8, and I need to get a new red pen apparently. We're getting there. Make it through this lesson. 0 divided by -8 is still just 0. Okay, so no issue there. -16 divided by -8 gives me a positive 2t squared. 64 turns into a minus 8t. And then -40 turns into a plus 5. Okay, at this point I've got choices. I can factor, I can complete the square, or I can use quadratic formula. Now if I think about completing the square, factoring, I'm going to start by saying 2 times 5, which gives me 10. My factors of 10 are 1 and 10. That's not going to equal 8. Or I can go 2 and 5, and that's not going to add up to 8 either. So I already know from the get-go that factoring ain't going to work. But if it did, that is a valid option. I could complete the square. We've practiced doing that recently. However, I kind of want to cut to the chase, and I'm going to go quadratic formula. I know it works. Let's make sure we use a strategy that we know works. So, as a reminder, I've got A, B, and C. And my quadratic formula is the opposite of b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So if I go to plug this in, the opposite of b is -8. So minus a -8 gives me a positive 8. Plus or minus the square root. B squared, which is -8 squared, gives me 64. Minus 4 times a, which is 2, and c, which is 5, all over 2 times a, which is 2. Okay. Moving right along, I've got 8 plus or minus the square root. 64 minus 4 times 2 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40, so minus 40. 2 times 2 gives me 4. So now I've got 8 plus or minus the square root of 24 all over 4. I'm going to have a little fun with this. I'm going to find the exact answer and the decimal just for old time's sake. So remember, for exact, I take that square root of 24 and I break it down. I've got 2 and 12, 2 and 6, 2 and 3. And we would be able to say that the pair of 2's have a buddy, so they break out of jail, whereas the 2 and the 3 don't. So as a result, I'm going to have 8 plus or minus. The pair of 2's breaks out of jail, and the 2 and the 3 left over are still there. So 2 times 3 leaves me a 6 inside, all over 4. If you remember this from when we did square root stuff earlier, you can only cancel across all 3. You can't just cancel one piece, you have to cancel across all 3. So I'm going to drop a 2 out of everything, and I'm left with 4 plus or minus root 6 all over 2. Those are the exact answers at this point. Now, I can be a little bit more specific. So I'm going to think about punching that in. So I've got, for the addition side, 4 plus second square root of 6 divide 2. I have as an option 3.22 seconds. And then as another option, I have 0.77 seconds. I guess technically it'd be 7/8 based on rounding. Okay? And so I get two answers right here of 3.22 and 0.78 seconds. Now, when I'm looking at this, I want to know, hey, is that right? Maybe, maybe not. So let's do a little check. It should be that if I plug these into my original h of t equation, that I should get about 40 when I plug these in. So I'm going to go to my graph, and I'm going to go to y equals. And I'm going to go at y equals, and I'm going to plug in our original equation, negative 16 x squared plus 64x. Now it has x instead of t, but it's still the same equation, okay? Now if I go to the table feature right here, second table, let me move this up a little bit. If I go to the table button, which is in blue, second table, it kind of gives me this list of values, right? Now, right now, it's what I want, but in case it isn't, go here. If you go to your Windows setting and right above it, you see table set right here. If I go to second table set, for the independent variable, it'll say ask. That's what you want. If it says auto, it's going to have a set list. But if it says ask, it does what we want to do. In the sense that when I go to that table, I can type in whatever I want. So I'm going to type these in right here. Okay? So I'm going to start by typing in 0.78 seconds. And it should be roughly 40. 40.186. That's very close considering rounding. I can also try the next one. 3.22 seconds. It should also be pretty close to 40. And again it is, 40.186. In fact, they both gave me the same amount. That's pretty great. That means that within my rounding, they are what I want and that I have the same value. And so we can check that right there.